welcome to Next Week Tonight. Welcome to Next Week Tonight, presented by Fusion Fantasy Football. I'm your host, Joshua, and this is the show that keeps you a week ahead of the competition. We talk about breakout ads, players you can stream, and trades you should be making, but all with the perspective a full week ahead. We're looking at week 5 tonight, even though the NFL has only had Thursday night game for week 4. All the rest of the week 4 games have not been played, and I am talking about players you need to have to be looking for week 5. Because you can add these streamers for free right now, stash them on your bench. You can pick up these players who I think have good possible matches this weekend, and everyone's going to be wanting to add them on waivers after week 4, but you can do it right now. That's what we're doing here in Next Week Tonight. Tonight, I'm also going to be doing something a little bit new. Going to be trying a flash, just quick hitting version. That's what we're going to go into right now. If you like what you're hearing, you want fuller explanation, stick around or look for the link to a fuller video, longer video for the full version for week 5, I should say. And you can check that out. I have all my explanations for why I think what I think. But let's get into it because these need to be quick. All right. For ads before week 4. First of all, I want to go over a couple players that are just kind of housekeeping. Jeff Wilson of the San Francisco 49ers, he needs to be owned and stashed. Simple as that. Look, a lot of people in the NFL, bad histories, accusations, records, whatever. We cheer for a lot of them anyway without thinking about it. But Darius Geis has a 6-game suspension. Darius Geis, that's right. I know you haven't heard that name in a while, but in week 5, he will be 1 week away from his 6-week suspension being served. Keep an eye on the news. Interesting stash. If your league allows suspended players to go onto the IR slot, you can stash him in there. John Ross or Colin Johnson. So with Shepard out, all these guys out for the Giants, you need those. I'm giving too much explanation. I said I wouldn't do that. Not a ton of ads. We're really focusing on streamers, getting ready for the week 6 games that we have our first bye weeks, and you're really going to need them. So I'm really trying to get into the gear of streamers now. Early in the season, we want those big ads, high value ads. Still going to be looking for them. Not so much came to me this week. I really was focusing on streamers. So quarterbacks, Jared Goff playing the Minnesota Vikings, 7th most points to quarterbacks. You can also go with Jameis Winston playing Washington, who gives up the most quarterback points. You can finally stream Winston. And just all your Saints, really. You can stream Beasley. We already talked about Kansas City last week. Bateman, Rashad Bateman for the Baltimore Ravens, coming back possibly this week, but great matchup. And after a week into the system, into practicing, I think his come out party is Monday night against I have it here as Baltimore. He is on Baltimore, Josh. That doesn't make sense. All right. No, Baltimore is playing Indianapolis. I'm going off memory. I can't find it on my list. They're playing Indianapolis. I remember now. And they give up a lot of points to wide receivers. This is not quick. Come on. Callaway, you got Marquez Callaway and you got Deontay Harris. You'll finally be able to stream them along with Winston against Washington. Stream Shenault, Laviska Shenault. He actually had a really good game tonight, so maybe he's going to be on the waiver wire. Targets coming up this next week, so maybe that's too late. But keep an eye out for him. Running backs, Nyheim Hines always deserves to be streamed. I just got to say it. For the Miami Tampa Bay game, it's an interesting matchup because Miami has a good pass defense. Tampa Bay usually likes to throw the ball. I'm just wondering if this could be a game where a running back for the Bucks could actually do something. Fournette, Ronald Jones, looking for those. I have a lot more tight ends for you. First of all, Evan Ingram must be owned. I had talked about John Ross and Colin Johnson earlier, but Evan Ingram is really the piece there that I think is going to profit a lot from Shepard being out. Schultz, Dalton Schultz for the Cowboys. He had a really good game last week, so he probably even got picked up by people. But still, keep an eye out because when he has a bad game against Cleveland, no, that's not who it is, Carolina, maybe he'll get dropped or something. So keep an eye out for Schultz. And then somebody who's really going to be attainable, although he also had a good week last week, Tyler Conklin, Minnesota Vikings. Really good matchup playing Detroit in week 5, who gives up like the third most points or yards to tight end. So keep an eye out for him. And then, like I said before, Saints, play all your Saints, including the defense special teams against Washington. I know Heineke has been running around, making some big plays. With that is going to come turnovers and mistakes and points for defenses. So it's not always going to look as good as it did against the Giants. Not always going to look that good. The Saints actually have a pretty good defense. So go ahead and stash them, and you'll be able to actually get several starts out of them. All right. I don't have a ton of trades either. So really, I don't have any. I shouldn't have said not a ton. I don't have any. 0. I thought about a bunch, but most of them have already been said. And I don't like to talk about ones that have already been said or that are obvious or you say you should do, but really you can't get them done. So nothing really difference making came to mind, so I'm not going to say it. All right, guys, that's the quick hit version. Maybe 7-8 minutes here. Maybe we could have been faster. Maybe I could make sure I don't have Bateman playing the Ravens in my notes. I should fix that, but fixed. Thanks, guys. If you want the full explanations, which you could hear I was begging to give you as I was giving those quick hits, keep listening if you're already on the full version, or hit the link that'll be down below to the full version. Thanks for joining me, guys. I'll see you next week if you have to go, if this is all the time you had. Thank you. Hope you got something out of this. Okay, now that they're all gone, it's just us. We're going to dive back into this. We're going to go over these a little bit more detail, and we're going to go over week 4 streamers that we called last week, and then recap how our streamers did in week 3 and the pickups. Spoiler alert, it was a good week. It's been a very good weeks, for the most part. I'd say 2 out of 3 weeks good so far. They're not all going to be this good, but as I said, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, it just takes one of these high upside guys to really hit to make all of it worth it. So going back to the top, I talked about Jeff Wilson. Look, he is several weeks out probably still. His surgery, serious. It was 6 months from like May up to 6 months. But that puts him all the way into October, November. So I expect to start hearing about him coming back, being designated to return, all of that mid-October. Okay. So he is a good enough player in a good enough situation, though, to warrant you keeping him stashed. And on some of these platforms, like I think Yahoo or even Flea Flicker, I noticed the other day, if there's an open spot in your IR, you can add right to IR. So just because you think, oh, my team's full, maybe not. Maybe your platform will allow you just to add them right in there. So go ahead and look for that. I also talked about Derrius Guice. And look, whatever you think about his history, it sounds like it was dismissed and settled, his issues. there's a lot of players in NFL, a lot of players in football that have histories, many of which we often forget. Uh, and we're still cheering for them when they score fantasy points for a team. So if you just set that aside, Darius Geis, very talented running back, big, promising prospect. I mean, he was all set to be Washington's starting running back. And he would be there right now as their starting running back. But once everything came out, an incident, and then back to college. Look, Washington just cut bait, drafted Antonio Gibson, and good for them. But there's going to be a team out there who might be interested in seeing what he still has, who might be willing to deal with some of the drama because they know that people forget. And it's been a little while. Dust is settled. And so they're gonna see if he can help their football team. And if he can't, they'll use him because that's what the NFL does. So it's an unfortunate part of just the way this entire league and the system works. But that aside, again, he is was a talented player. I have not heard anything specifically from him or his camp or whatever we want to call it that he wants to return. Mostly this is going off the fact that the NFL kind of seemingly out of nowhere this summer gave him a 6-game suspension, which sounds like a bad thing, but it was known that it had to happen for him to return to football. So they were essentially clearing the path for him to come back by doing that. Now, no team thought that he was worth signing that I know of, even practicing or trying out anything in the offseason. Understandable. Now, the advantage of that would have been he would have been able to practice with them in the preseason. Once the games start, suspension kicks in. Typically, for most suspensions, no practicing with the team. Can't be in the facility at all. So he's not going to get signed and be practicing or anything like that. All right. This is just in the interest of being a week or 2 ahead of any blurb coming out where on Twitter or something saying, hey, Darius Geis's 6-game suspension is over. And everyone's like, oh, that's interesting. Goes to Adam. All right. So by the end of next week, you should stash him where you can or you want to. All right. The Giants. The Giants are playing the Saints in week 4. Not a great matchup. I mean, I like them for week 5 matchups. But I think the Giants offense and Daniel Jones has shown they're at least going to still push the ball and challenge. I don't know if they'll have a ton of success in actual touchdown points, but I do think that you'll want to keep an eye out to see if John Ross, who went on IR before the season, meaning they couldn't just bring him back after 3 weeks, but it's coincidentally after 3 weeks they've designated him to return and he's been practicing as of at least Wednesday. So if they want to move him right in and he's active this week, he's an interesting player depending on how long Shepard and Slayton are going to be out. Evan Engram obviously takes most of the benefit there, but they still need someone on the outside opposite Golladay. I think that can absolutely be John Ross. Now, Colin Johnson filled in last week after the injuries and had several targets. I think maybe even 7. But John Ross wasn't active. So I understand the optimism on Colin Johnson. I'm right there with you. I just don't know if when they're both active, if Colin Johnson will be ahead of John Ross. All right. So keep an eye on that. Whichever one is active, starting with Ross first, add them, stash them where appropriate. Okay. because all it takes is one big play. Everyone gets excited about it again. They're going to go try and add him. Now, everyone's talking about Kadarius Toney. Same thing. He could have a big play. He's electric. He loves doing spin moves. Like, yeah, he might break something to have a big play. People might get excited. If you have room and you think you can trade your players, even lower bench players, go ahead, stash him. He could also increase in value over the weekend. But you got to trade him then, because we have no faith in Toney, right? Hashtag never Toney. I'm going to try and get that started. Okay, into the streamers. Week 5 streamers. Jared Goff. I know it's not a great sounding name, but it's a streamer, okay? Come on, you can't be too picky. Also playing Minnesota. They're going to be pushing each other. Minnesota's done that to everyone. Everyone's scoring on them, and everyone's scoring on Detroit. So this is, I expect to be a high, implied total points. I just want to play anyone in that game, really. All right. Jameis Winston playing Washington, who's giving it the most quarterback points. If you were ever going to start, the problem is the volume right now. But if he and Heineke, I could easily see an ugly high-scoring game. But then again, I could easily see the Saints shutting him down. I just think that even if he doesn't get the volume, this could be one of those couple touchdowns games, few touchdown games, even on low volume for Winston. So, again, ugly. As always, I say these in order of priority, okay? So, if I say one first, that's the one you should do if you can. At least that's the order I'm putting in them. Maybe you hear one and you like it so much better than the other ones. Go for it. All right. Wide receivers. Of course, last we talked about getting and streaming Emmanuel Sanders because the air yards, everything was there. And sure enough, it hit 2 touchdowns. This isn't the recap. We'll get to that later. But you can still do the same thing with Cole Beasley. All right. Kansas City, big matchup. I mean, these are 2 big teams in the AFC. Kansas City, Buffalo. Great game. But Beasley could see a lot of targets going his way. Rashad Bateman, it's begun. You know I love him. I've been talking about Bateman all off season. This is my signature take. Lamar Jackson's already throwing it better. We just saw Marquise Brown drop a couple touchdowns. Okay, Marquise Brown is looking good despite himself. All right, despite everything, they're still managing. Lamar Jackson is still managing to make him look good and have the best start of his season he's had since week 1 of his rookie year. So I understand being excited, but maybe that should have been my trade. Trade Marquise Brown away. See, that's why you stick around, guys. You get this extra content. There we go. There's a trade. We got it. I like Bateman against the Indianapolis Colts. They're giving up points to the receivers. Simple as that. I think this is a week after returning. Bateman will be more involved, more back into the swing of things. There we go. Not his first game back. That's the point. All right. And then going back to the Saints, Marquez Callaway, Deontay Harris, deeper leagues, you can take a shot there. I really should have had that behind Shenault, who's a more obvious play against Tennessee Titans, who were giving up third most yards. And Shenault's much more involved, at least on this Thursday night. Again, maybe it's too late now. Everyone's in on it. I don't know. Running backs, Nyheim Hines. I mean, you could basically start him every week in the flex if you wanted to. So Is he a streamer? Maybe. Should he already be owned everywhere? Yes. Am I still going to say it here? Yes. Am I going to put it on my recap and claim I'm a genius with a green check mark next to it when it hits? No, I'm really not. I just wanted to make sure Hines was owned. All right, and then running backs in Tampa Bay. Eventually, they have to get a rushing touchdown, right? That's not Godwin. I kind of like this game to be one where Tampa Bay runs the ball because, well, the Dolphins' rush defense isn't great. And even if it's decent, it's not as good as their pass defense. You know, their cornerback, Xavier Howard, all these guys. So I could see a situation where Tampa Bay decides to attack the ground. That's all. We're getting desperate. I understand. If I'm saying Ronald Jones, we're desperate, okay? Tight ends, we already talked about Evan Engram, Dallas giving up lots of points. The Giants with their wide receiver injuries, all of it, everything. He should be owned. That's all I'm saying here. Same with Dalton Schultz. Should be owned. These two are playing each other in a tight end 12 battle, right? And then finally, more of a real streaming guy. I'm sure you can go get in most normal leagues. Tyler Conklin, Vikings playing Detroit, who give up the third most yards to tight end. He just had a strong game. It's going to bounce between Conklin and Osborne as the third guy in that receiving game. And I think in that matchup, it's going to be Conklin. I don't think in week 4, when the Vikings play, let me double check here that I have this right. Yeah, they play the Browns. They play Cleveland. The much better defense. It's probably going to be a bad game all around, but definitely for Conklin. All right. And we talked about the Saints. You can play their defense because I do think they're a good defense, and Washington and Heineke is the kind of offense that could turnovers, sacks, all of that, get you more points beyond just the points against for your defense. All right, and then trades, as we talked about, Marquise Hollywood Brown, trade him away. Trade him away. All right. Okay. All right, guys. So recap week 4 show. Of course, I talked about some players that I'd written a little bit of an article about that were players you could let go. Now, I don't mean cut necessarily. Some of them were trade away targets. So I got that out last Monday ahead of the waivers so that you could have players you could actually cut. And we talked about Russell Gage, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Chester Rogers as guys you don't need to own. All checked out after week 3. All right. Talk about running backs. Talk about James Conner, Ronald Jones, Justin Jackson. James Conner had a good game, finally. Like a really good game. 11 for 43 on 2 touchdowns and 1 reception. I mean, it's a good points game. It's going to be, look, I said all along, James Conner in best ball, great, because he was cheap and he's going to have these games that just pop into your running back slot. Fantastic. You can call it zero running back, whatever you want to do. I don't care. But was a great option. But for week in, week out leagues where you set your lineup, not a great option. Didn't like it. There you go. Tight ends, Mike Gesicki, Blake Jarwin, Zach Ertz. So Blake Jarwin held out with, said it's Dalton Schultz who's their tight end 1, and sure enough, he was that last weekend. Mike Gesicki finally had a good game. I view this as a sell high moment. Beautiful. I'm trying to sell him. Hopefully I can for something I actually need. And Zach Ertz, I don't see this so much as Zach Ertz like stepping up or anything. I see it as Goddard actually took a step back. He tripped and the ball was intercepted. A ball that was a little bit out in front of him. He didn't bring it in when he could have probably. There's a bunch of things that is just a bad game for Goddard. So he's going to need to really step it up, come back strong. But going forward, I don't have any confidence in Ertz. That was the point. All right. So we talked about players who got to be owned last week. We talked about Austin Hooper, also a streamer candidate. There you go. Darnell Mooney, Justin Fields. We said, look, you're holding them because we didn't pick them up last week for week 4. For week 3, we picked them up last week for week 4 because that was the week 4 show. Get it? So this is the week against Detroit that we wanted them for. I hope you weren't listening to people telling you to start them against the Cleveland Browns defense. That was a bad idea. All right. Zach Moss. Hitting, absolute hitting. And then we talked about Rashad Bateman coming off IR. There you go. Michael Carter. These were breakouts to add. Michael Carter, he ended up going 9 for 24, 2 of 3 for 5 yards receiving. Decent. Not too bad. Emmanuel Sanders, we talked about his air yards, his target share, everything, and how much the Bills were throwing, and yet somehow he wasn't getting the points. Well, they finally came in week 4. Hope you were listening. And even Cole Beasley had a great game as well. We said add both of those guys. Really, really, really happy with the results. Jalen Reagor, Eagles, 5 of 8 for 53 yards. That's a solid outing in what was a terrible offensive day. Like, he was probably the best receiver production-wise for the Eagles. So definitely someone you want to keep an eye on, and someone you might still be able to get because it was such a bad game overall. He might be getting overlooked. All right. Jamison Crowder, I think he's back week 4. Worth a stash, depending how deep you are. Again, we're getting deeper and deeper as we go here. The list is by priority, but it also partially reflects depth. Zach Pascal, same thing. Ugly games, but he's kind of the wide receiver 2 there. Demetric Felton, 2 of 3 for 13 yards. Didn't see much, so that's not really anything there. I know it was an interesting game for the Browns against the Bears. I don't really trust, believing the stats from that game, like for Hunt either, that kind of thing. So, but as other players are coming back, Felton's going to disappear. And Odell Beckham is already back, so don't worry about him. Luke Farrell, not a hit, because actually what happened was they traded for Dan Arnold right before. So nothing's materialized here. Complete miss. I think it was 1 for 1 for -1 yards. All right. Week 3 streamers. How did that go? Daniel Jones, we said, against Atlanta, did great. It was pretty good. All right. Pollard, not a great result, but he's still out there, still getting the work, still involved the way we want to, still explosive and efficient. It was a perfect kind of game for Zeke. Just the matchup, the game script, I thought the Eagles would push him more. They didn't. Zeke just rolled all over him. I don't think this is a game where, because we've talked about Zeke and Pollard before, this game wasn't proof Zeke's back, he's fine. No, this game was proof that there's going to be games where this happens. But Pollard was still out there a lot. So really, it doesn't prove that. If anything, it proves that Pollard is still going to be part of things, even in a game like this. All right? Just Pollard didn't get enough big plays or a touchdown or anything like that. That's all. All right? Michael Valdes-Scantling, 3 of 4 for 59 yards, finally connecting. Love to see it. Gerald Everett. This was everything we wanted to see from Gerald Everett. The exact progression we've been talking about. And then we finally hit one of these games where the defense was shutting down the deep ball, and Russell Wilson had to throw a little bit shorter down the middle to Gerald Everett. 5 for 5 for 53 yards. I mean, it's a great 10 points. All right. That's above replacement. That's all we want from a tight end, especially without a touchdown. That is great. So, unfortunately, he is on the COVID list. So, I don't know what's going to happen for him for week 4, but I think he's got a good matchup week 5 against I'm trying to remember now. The Rams, which are a good defense, but I think as a tight end, he'll actually do fine in that matchup specifically. So love him. I mean, you can trade him off of that, but I'd rather stash him where I can actually use him. If you don't need him, of course, trade anyone you don't need. All right. Trade targets. We talked about selling Tyler Higbee high, and then trading Gronk high for Kittle. Kittle had a good breakout comeback game, whatever you want to call it. So that's not going to be low. Gronk didn't have a great game. He was out there, no touchdown though. Still is Gronk, and he's probably going to crush the Patriots this week. Probably. Higbee. Again, my point on Higbee was his target share, everything is kind of already as good as it's going to get. I think there's only one way for it to get better, and that would be, I guess, touchdowns. He might get some of the touchdowns that Kupp has gotten lately, but also Robert Woods could use some touchdowns. So I don't know, especially if Robert Woods has any kind of resurgence here, it's going to eat out of Higbee's work too. So I just don't really think he has a ceiling above where he is and what he's already done. That's all. All right, guys. So great week 3 show, week 4 show. If these last couple weeks aren't convincing you on the next week to night process and the value of thinking this way and making these kind of moves, I don't know what else to do. I'm not sure I'm going to have a better 2 weeks for the rest of the season. So maybe that's why you're not going to listen anymore. You figure it's all downhill from now. I don't know, but hope you are getting something out of this. I know at least some of you had said that that's something that you enjoy because you enjoy the process of thinking about the next week, thinking about streamers and trades and things ahead of time. And just thinking about it that way helps you. Even if my advice is terrible, just you thinking about the future and your team helps you be ahead of your league. And so hopefully it's helping at least that much. I do remember there was one thing I want to talk about with James White is hurt and out for the season. So I like JJ Taylor. I like Brandon Bolden. I haven't been high on Ramondre Stevenson, but he can absolutely be the next Brandon Bolden. So go ahead and stash him. There's your freebie ad here on the end of the pod, the end of the show. Ramondre Stevenson, stash him. Obviously in dynasty leagues and such, he's already owned, but go stash him. This week they might try to use him to replace the Bolden role, who's the kind of do it all, can receive, pass protect, because Damian Harris struggled a little bit in the pass pro. So maybe they try and use him, and if he succeeds, great, good for him. If he doesn't, it's just going to be Bolden again. And then JJ Taylor, maybe in the future, but not in week 4. Not in week 4 against the Bucks. So, all right, guys, thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you get something out of it. Let me know success stories, failures. You listen to me and this happened and you hate me. I want to hear about it. So go ahead and follow me on Twitter at FusionFFB, email fusionffb@gmail.com. Don't forget to hit up the website. Keep an eye out. Maybe I'll have other articles randomly coming out. And of course, there's always going to be the link to the podcast and the video on there when it comes out. Easiest way to find out about that, especially if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe or follow if you're on your podcast platform, and you'll just get my episode when it comes out. So thanks again for joining me, guys. Have a great week 4, and I'll see you in week 6.